Hey, I'm back with my round 4 game. This time I'm playing a quite a bit stronger player, the strongest player I've faced so far. He's around 2000, and we got a King's Indian, which is the first time I'm playing an opening that I actually have spent a little bit of time on. And so we're playing this H3 Bishop E3 system, and we get E5 early. We push, and we're going to go G5, and he plays here, and we got to play this F3 move. And I've faced this quite a bit, which kind of makes me a bit frustrated. I can't ever quite remember when to move this knight, because I know there's some ideas with H5 that actually came into play in this game. So he played A5, and I played knight here, and then he played C6, which is still theory, or still prep for us, and I'm supposed to play queen to D2. But I couldn't really remember, because I know he has this idea of H5, and we kind of discourage it with queen to d2. Not so much discourage it, but it's just not good. It's just not as good as it. It's not necessary. But I couldn't remember. I thought maybe I should play h5 immediately. I just couldn't. Again, as I talked about in the last game, I spent a lot of time sort of relying on memory more than calculation. But you know, h5 is a pretty viable way to play. Actually, it's totally fine. So say he captures, and maybe I'll play h5 myself, and we'll have a good game. The move that we're supposed to play is not knight g3, which again is okay, but not great. But it's just queen to d2, and then we ask him to make a move. So maybe he captures, we capture, plays a4, and now we're happy to play knight g3 because after h5, it's a different ball game. We can maybe even play knight to b5. We have some ideas here, and this is just not quite as good. We're not going to capture. I mean, we could capture. It's different here because we take. He takes. We take. He comes with this check, and we can actually just block with the queen. Actually, and when he captures here with the queen, we can take this guy, and we don't take this pawn, but instead we can just castle, and we have a safe king. And we maybe have some ideas of trying to attack, and this would be a relatively comfortable position for us. Instead, this is not quite what happened. I played knight g3 immediately before queen to d2, and he hit with h5. And I know that if I capture here, and he takes here, and I take back, this queen check is obnoxious. I don't want to come back with the queen, and so this queen d2 move gives us this additional option that we don't have. So now I play queen to d2, and he pushes the pawn, and now he gets this pawn here on h4 with tempo. I've spent a lot of moves getting my knight to e2. I spent 3 moves getting my knight to e2, and this kind of does end my attack. Now this pawn is weak, and I do end up winning the pawn much later. But this was slow, and it gives black time to generate some attack. He played a4. And I played rook to b1, which is a hilarious move. This is funny. In a training game recently, I allowed this knight to b3 trap or fork, and it turns out I just for some reason thought the knight to b3. I would take, and then he would take, and in my head I gave him an extra move in a row, and then he would take the rook, and so I thought that was going to happen. So I thought I was preventing that. That's just funny because I gave him an extra move in my head. So I played rook to b1. And now he captured. I captured with the pawn, and he brought this queen out. And I mean, I'm doing fine here, but I'm already sort of like not sure. It's a little bit sketchy. I immediately played bishop to g5 and went for this pawn. But that's hasty. In my head, I had it. If I didn't play this immediately. So, for example, I played, say, the best move, which is maybe to play here, or even actually I could have justified my rook b1. I could play b4 here, and he's got to take en passant, and I come here, and you know he's got to move his queen now, and I can probably have played b4, and this would have been a nice way to play. I probably should have considered this. I did think about it, but I thought it was silly. But if I play, like, say, knight c1, I thought he'll drop this knight back, and if I play here, I thought maybe he could defend the pawn somehow. And I was like, I'm not going to win the pawn if I don't go for it immediately. I'm not going to win it. That's just crazy talk. That pawn is going to be weak forever. And so a takeaway for me, something I want to try to remember is that like when there's a super weak pawn like that, I don't have to go win it immediately. I can take my time and try to win it later. This knight to c1 is a nice move. It's preventing this b5. Let's give that move back. It's preventing b5, and I'm also going to head to d3. So I had seen this idea of knight to c1 before, and I did consider it, but I thought the only point was to go to d3. And if the only point is to go to d3, I can do that whenever I want. He can never stop me from playing knight c1, knight to d3. What I didn't recognize is that it's actually slowing down his attack here. So, for example, let's say he plays bishop d7 trying to insist on it. Well, now I can maybe play knight to d3. Perhaps he captures. I come here, and now he gets it anyway. But like this is very different from what happens in the game. My bishop's developed. My king is ready to castle. I've got all kinds of pieces just barreling down on the king side. I've got way more attackers here than he has defenders, and this would be a pretty comfortable way for me to play. It would be difficult to see how he's gonna make more progress. He's stalled out on the queen side. His king side has nothing going on, and this is just a really comfortable way to play. I have nice squares for all of my pieces, and yeah, it would have been nice. I can then castle, go after this pawn. I even have like maybe I'll even play like something like this and go win the pawn this way. I have ideas. Instead, I got in a rush, and I went for this pawn immediately. And he plays b5. And actually, black is just better now. I mean, not hugely better, but black is better. I played here. This looks like the most awkward move of all time, but I didn't have another idea. I was really afraid that, for example, let's say I take this pawn. I was really afraid of like takes. Oh, sorry, not here. I did the order wrong. b4 first. Then I have to move this knight back, and now we go into all this takes stuff. And I thought maybe I would have to play like here, and this is quite bad. He'll get f5, and I was like, I don't know. I mean, I'm technically up a piece, but like my pieces are super awkward, and this just looked terrifying to me, and I didn't want any part of it. He has bishop to b7. He can win this pawn. My king is super exposed. I'm probably never going to get castled. I thought this was terrifying. I didn't want anything to do with it. So instead, this is why I played bishop to g2, just preventing that. But, he can continue on now. He just plays bishop to a6. This is really awkward for me. It's not clear what I'm going to do. Or maybe just b4 immediately, and I can... This is what he did. He played b4, and I went knight back to d1, and now he could play bishop to a6. And, he's got so much space on the queen side, and it's not clear now that he has any fewer pieces. Notice when we looked earlier, I had, my bishops on d3 and e3. I still had a knight here. This knight was gone, and so was this knight, and I had way more pieces on the queen side than he does. Now, who has more pieces on the queen side? He's got a rook, a queen, a bishop, a knight. I've got, what, a queen? And maybe a knight, if I'm lucky. Neither of these knights have any great forward squares. I had ideas of trying to do this, but I can't yet, anyway. So this would have been a nice way for him to play. Instead, big relief. I guess he thought that there was... I don't know what he calculated exactly, but this just doesn't work. I traded queens. I'm super happy, because now my king can go live on d2 and help. He captures here. I play across. He captures, I take, and now he plays bishop a6. And so I have comfort now. I have room for my pieces now, because this pawn on b4 was super restrictive. And now that it's gone, I feel good. Technically, I guess it's saying that he's still a bit better. He should play... It's giving like knight to d3 is annoying, and I agree, it is pretty annoying. But instead, he played rook over to b8, and I brought the bishop back. So again, this is funny, because, both my knights have made so many moves, and my bishop is toggled back and forth. Clearly, I've done something wrong if this is what I've got to do. He played his check, and I'm really happy, because this knight was probably his best piece, and I just get to take it. brings the bishop in. I get to win a pawn. Take here, and I thought this was a nice move. I mean, it is clearly not the best, and I thought it was an interesting try because I'm getting ready to win this a5 pawn. I'm already up a past b pawn. I'm gonna be able to put my king on d2. I can bring a knight into here, or perhaps I can put my knight here and here. I'll take this guy, come back across. The king will come up. The rook will come across, and like I have a pretty comfortable way to like start making progress and improve my position. So he captures here, and I take, and he gets 3 pawns for the piece. I mean, I'm about to be 2 pawns up, but so he's really only getting, technically 1 pawn for the piece. But these passed pawns are pretty scary, and they almost works. Like we're gonna see here in a bit. I got kind of lucky. He played here. I came out. I was trying to engineer a blockade. I was like, I can't let these pawns move forward, and so this was the best idea for a blockade I have, trying to prevent this pawn from moving forward, and I'll just try to attack it because it's a little bit weak. He brought this rook out, and I calculated a really pretty nice sequence here. I capture the pawn, he plays f5, and now I come here attacking this pawn. He plays f4, I brought the knight to d5, and he comes and attacks the bishop. And it looks like that I probably can't take the pawn, but I can. I take it, he comes here, because I have this nice move. And the point is that if he takes the knight, I'm going to just defend the bishop with this way. And if he takes the bishop, which he did, I have this check. And he spins a move, I take the rook, he takes my knight, and I take this pawn. And now, I'm only up in exchange now, plus a pawn. But his king is cut off, my king has clear out forward. He does have the bishop pair, but I have 3 passed pawns versus his 2 passed pawns. And this should be pretty comfortable. I played king to f7, I came across, hit the bishop, he dropped the bishop back, and now it's time to bring the king up. I thought he would just move the bishop, but he doesn't. He plays f3, which is kind of a neat trick, because I can't take it, because there's no way to stop the pawn. So I played king here, and he's got to push, and again, I can't take this pawn, because he'll take back with the bishop, and I can't take the bishop, because this move. So I played here with the idea that, aha, I'll go take, you'll take, and then I can take, because I'll just play here, and I'll be able to stop the pawn. But he uncorks a move I didn't see at all, and I got so lucky that it doesn't actually work. He plays bishop to d4. I love all these little tactics that he's done here of trying to get his pawns forward. I think it's really clever, but I'm just really lucky, because if I don't, it looks like if I take the bishop, I can't stop this pawn, which is kind of true. But I have to take the bishop, because if I play it out to here or to here, which are my only other moves, I definitely can't stop the pawn. So I was lucky that I could take, and when he pushes, I get g5, and I'm like, woo! Thankfully, I had this g5 idea, because now I let him queen, and I'm just really lucky that he's not queening with check, and that his king is situated on this file, and that I have this pawn here, because I give this check, and we find ourselves in this ending. He takes this pawn, and yeah, I honestly wasn't 100% sure what the best way to convert this was, but it turns out he made it easier on me than he needed to. I brought my king up, and my point is that I want to try to advance this pawn as far as possible, and then eventually I thought he would have to sack his bishop for it. I would take back with the knight, and then I'd get back into a king and pawn ending. But it turns out there's maybe an easier way. Instead of that, I can probably just advance this pawn. And I'm going to use this pawn or this pawn. One's going to be a decoy. And I can even give up the knight in some lines. So for example, let's say I advance this guy, and he brings his king up, and just ignore the fact that he can trade here. I can probably do something like, let's just do this, ignore the fact that he can take the pawn. Say that I play here, and he does like, I don't know, say he plays like, I don't know, give him this move. And I'll play here, check, and say he comes here. And if he does, like, we get into a situation like this, where I give him the knight. He can't stop the pawns with his bishop. So I always have this idea. So, like, for example, say I advance this pawn. He tries to blockade this one. Well, I can advance, and if he tries to blockade this one, again, ignore the fact that you can just take it. I don't need this. Because now I can advance this one. And I mean, yeah, he can try to stop this guy, but I'll advance here. And then say he moves, I'll advance here. But now he's got to come here, and now I can advance here. So I had this idea in mind as well. That was kind of an awkward way to get there to demonstrate that point, but I had this idea. So instead, we played here. There was one sort of interesting moment. My idea was that I was just going to advance the pawn, and I wanted to come here, and my point was, like, I thought here I would just play like this, but then it turns out if I play this, this is actually just a draw now, because I can't ever do anything now. You know, I thought maybe I would try to play over here and try to make a run for it, but it just can't. I didn't see a way to go forward, so I didn't advance the pawn. I wanted to engineer it, advancing this pawn in a way where he didn't have king to d5. And so I rerouted until he doesn't have that option, and I took away the g5 square, and now I'm ready to advance the pawn. But he just makes it easy. I don't know why he moved his king over this way. I totally expected the king to come this way, something like this, and then I thought I'd play h5, and then I thought he would play here, and then my intention was to go put the king here, and then I will get the knight to either this square or this square, and it just slowly advance the pawn and work it up the board. But when he played this way, just letting me come in, now it's just really, really easy. I'm just engineering the knight to where I want it to be. I mean, again, he didn't have to move his king. It probably shouldn't have, maybe. Maybe he just needs to keep moving. Well, he can't move the bishop because I'll just shut him out. He moves the king, I come up, move here, and he's forced to move the bishop now, and I just block it out, and here he finally resigns. So quite a nice inning, a complicated game that I kind of got outplayed. I learned a lot about this queenside play that black can get here. So if we go back to the game after something like early on, again, the first thing to note is that play this queen to d2 before knight to g3 when you have this f3 system. When you've been forced to play f3, the queen belongs on d2, which makes sense because, like, you know, when the pawn's still on f2, the queen is actually pretty helpful in defending this g4 so that we can play g5. But with f3, the queen's doing nothing. And we're preparing to castle this way. So not knight g3 immediately because of this h5 idea, but queen to d2. And then even when we did go down this line, recognizing that, one, there's no actual threat here. This was just a clean waste of a tempo. But after this, not being in a rush to go win this pawn, but instead recognizing that the play is happening on the queen side of the board, and this knight to c1, knight to d3, and then also just shutting down this b5 move and keeping our pieces where the action is happening. He's trying to attack on the queen side, but we're stronger on the queen side and should leave our pieces there. Anyhow, I hope that this was a fun game for you guys and you take something away from it, and I wish you the best. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.